There is a moment every tennis player experiences. It might happen while watching Federer glide across the baseline, or Nadal grind through a point with primal intensity, or Djokovic turning defense into attack with supernatural calmness. Somewhere between those highlights and the quiet moments in your own matches, a small voice whispers inside you. If I hit like that, I would be unstoppable. And so you try. You copy the stance, the grip, the swing, the energy. You copy the pro because it feels like reaching for something superior, something elevated, something that promises a shortcut to a better version of yourself. And yet, somehow, the more you try to play like them, the more disconnected your own tennis becomes. The timing feels off. The confidence dies quickly. The swing feels forced or unnatural. You begin to judge yourself more harshly. And what started as inspiration slowly turns into frustration. You begin to wonder why copying a pro doesn't give you the magic you see on TV. But here's the truth. You copy pros not because it makes you better, but because psychologically, it feels safer than accepting who you actually are as a player. This episode explores why we do this. Why copying pros is so emotionally tempting. Why it rarely works. And what discovering your own game truly means. Not for your results, but for your identity. Let's start with something obvious but rarely acknowledged. Copying pros feels emotionally comforting. When you imitate a professional, you borrow their confidence. You borrow their identity. You borrow their sense of control. Their game becomes a shield you hide behind, especially when your own game feels chaotic, inconsistent, or undefined. Copying feels like belonging. Copying feels like certainty. Copying feels like safety. Watching a pro gives you the illusion of structure. They show you what good looks like. They give you a blueprint. And as humans, we crave blueprints. We crave order over chaos. We crave predictable paths. So instead of creating our own messy, imperfect, personal version of tennis, we reach for a polished template that's already proven. But this creates the first psychological trap. You begin to measure yourself against someone whose entire life, body, training, childhood, psychology, biomechanics, and environment has nothing in common with yours. You take a frame designed for them and try to force yourself inside it. And the more you try to fit, the more you disconnect from your natural instincts. Copying pros becomes a way of avoiding the uncomfortable truth that your game is different, and that different might actually be good. The second reason you copy pros is identity insecurity. When you don't fully trust who you are as a player, you try to borrow the identity of someone who seems complete. If you feel inconsistent, you imitate someone stable. If you feel slow, you imitate someone explosive. If you feel unsure, you imitate someone who radiates clarity. This isn't weakness, it's human psychology. When your sense of self feels shaky, you reach for someone whose identity feels unshakable. But here's the paradox. The more you copy, the less identity you develop. The more you imitate, the more your true game becomes buried under layers of inauthentic movement. You become a patchwork of borrowed pieces, none of which belong to you. And this creates internal tension. You've lost the connection between how you naturally move, feel, and think, and the version of yourself you're trying to perform. This is why you can look great in practice, but fall apart in matches. You're playing someone else's game, not yours. And this leads to the third psychological layer, perfection fantasy. When you copy a pro, you're not copying their technique. You're copying your fantasy of their technique. You're copying the edited version of their game. The highlight reel. The cleanest moments, stripped of history, repetition, pain, subtle micro-adjustments, and thousands of hours of failure. You're copying something you don't truly understand. So you set expectations around movements you can't realistically execute under pressure. And this creates a brutal internal cycle. You try, it fails, you blame yourself, you try harder, it fails again, your identity cracks. But the fourth layer is the most emotional. Imitation protects you from vulnerability. Because if you play your game and lose, it feels personal. It feels like you lost because you weren't good enough. But if you play someone else's game, you can mentally detach. You can say, well, that wasn't really me. Copying becomes a psychological escape route from responsibility. It gives you a buffer between your true self and the outcome. This is why some players change their style every month. 1 month they're Nadal, moonballing with heavy topspin. Next month they're Federer, slicing and gliding. Then they're Djokovic, stretching like rubber. They're searching not for a game, but for an identity they don't have to own completely. But here's the quieter truth beneath all of this. Copying pros is a sign that you haven't yet met your real game. Your real game is not the one you fantasize about. Your real game is not the one you imitate. Your real game is the one that shows up under pressure. The one that remains when the noise falls away. The one you default to when your ego is too tired to pretend. Your real game may not look like a pro, but it will always feel like you. And you cannot build confidence on a game that isn't yours. Now, let's explore what it actually means to find your own game. Finding your game doesn't mean you stop learning from the pros. It means you stop copying and start absorbing. You take what fits your body, your mind, your emotional style, and you release what doesn't. You play in a way that honors your strengths, not in a way that hides your weaknesses behind someone else's patterns. Finding your game is an act of self-acceptance. It requires honesty, vulnerability, patience. It requires noticing what feels natural. Your rhythm, your timing, your preferred pace, your instinctive patterns, your emotional style of competing. This is the opposite of copying. It's listening. Players who find their own game feel more grounded, more confident, more connected. They stop trying to perform and start trying to express. Their tennis becomes clearer. Their decision-making becomes easier. Their mind becomes calmer, because they're no longer fighting against themselves. You don't have to be a pro to play authentic tennis. You just have to stop hiding inside someone else's identity. Now here's your CTA, clean, direct, emotionally aligned. If this episode revealed something about your own habits on court, subscribe to the channel for more psychology-driven insights that cut straight to the truth behind your game. Share this episode with someone who constantly switches styles or imitates pros. They'll feel understood in a way no coach has ever explained. And tell me in the comments, have you ever realized you were copying a pro? And did it actually help or make you feel lost? Your experience might help another player finally understand what's been holding them back. And here's your closing message. Your tennis becomes extraordinary not when you copy greatness, but when you uncover the part of yourself you've been ignoring. The part that moves naturally. The part that feels effortless. The part that isn't trying to be someone else. Your game doesn't need to look like a pro's game. It only needs to look like yours. Because the moment you stop imitating and start expressing, the confidence you've been chasing finally has space to grow.